Well, welcome to another episode of Patio Pondering Podcast. I have with me a friend from Burrows/Delphi, Indiana, Mr. Jason Scott from Scott Farms in Cass County, right?
Cass and Carroll. We actually
Carroll.
live in Carroll.
Cass and Carroll.
Most of the acres are in Carroll.
Yeah. Cool. And it's funny, you got a Delphi address, but you're not close to Delphi.
Yeah. Actually got a Camden address now. It's where I did live before. Delphi was across the road and Camden was on the other side of the road. So we're actually, Camden's the town we associate with. Burrows actually has a post office, but it's just a P.O. box. So there's not very many Burrows addresses out there.
Yeah. It climbers, Burrows. Just like if you blink, you missed them both. They're along along 24. Yeah. And now that you got the bypass.
Climbers doesn't have a post office, so they don't get that.
Yeah. And they don't have much business now with the fertilizer plant.
Logansport.
Gotcha. Well, it's funny, Jason. I went back in my messages on Twitter, X, and we first corresponded on March 7th, 2014.
That was a while ago. That was 10 years ago.
A while ago. That's funny.
11 years ago.
11. Yeah, 11 years ago. Crazy.
I don't think we were the OGs, but we were on there pretty early.
Yeah, and it's amazing the amount of people that I've gone through as I've been preparing podcast episodes, going Twitter.
Yeah.
it's amazing what we've done, and I guess everybody's transferred to TikTok now, and it's a different vibe.
I got TikTok, but it seemed like the ag stuff on TikTok is not the same as like Twitter or even Facebook or any of that stuff. It just seems different on there. It's like a younger crowd, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think we missed the peak of it. Yeah. It seemed like I talked to people, and the peak for Farm Talk on Twitter was 3-4 years ago. When the Farm Talk was really going big, and that's just when I got on to Twitter or TikTok, and it's like any other social media, it just changes.
Yeah.
But we didn't get on here to talk about our history with Twitter or lament missing out on the TikTok Farm Talk craze. We're here to talk about Jason and his upbringing as a farmer and agriculture and how his agricultural roots formed him. So, Jason, before we get started, can you kind of just give an idea of where you farm, where you live, a little bit about your operation, not so much about the intricacies, but just kind of give a general idea of how you farm and the makeup?
Yeah, so just general info. I'm probably a stereotypical farm kid growing up as you could get. I had grew up on a hog farm, a couple hundred sows. We had York gilts, bred them to Hamp boars. That's probably where I liked the Hampshire pigs from. Used to be, I can remember very fond memories of getting off school bus, and the boar lot was right by the house, and there'd be like 3 brand new Hamp boars out there. And that was pretty neat when you used to have a bunch of white pigs on the farm, and here's some little young ones with belts and ready to get to work. So did that, and real fun time growing up. Just normal country kid. There was a pond across the road I used to go fishing at. I got a brother and a sister. Just pretty normal family. I'm late Gen X. We were the last generation basically to have a mom stay at home with you, and she did that until teenage years, and then she went and got a job. And you do see that on talking about TikTok. You see a lot of the Gen X longing for what used to be, pre-cell phones and that time period, and I'm one of them. I mean, that was some of the most fun I had was growing up. So graduated high school, went to Delphi in 97. We live, say, between Delphi and Logansport. Most of the business we do is in Logansport. We kind of associate with that more than we do Delphi. But yeah, grew up, went to school, played a little football in school, not very much. About 2 years, and went to Purdue like most college kids wanting to go into ag after school, and did that about 3 semesters. Didn't really like it. I liked meeting friends and all that stuff, but I was tired of school basically. By the time you went through high school, and it was just, I'm done with this. I'm ready to go get a job and let's go on. I don't plan on moving away. So came home, had a kid. Kind of the first job I had right out of school was I went and I hauled Pepsi for a while. That was a few months, and didn't pay very well. And kind of bounced around a couple jobs after that, trying to find something I liked. And I ended up landing at the co-op up there in Climbers, where I went kind of for my first real full-time job that lasted for a while. And typical co-op worker, drove semi, hauled stuff, ran a sprayer, did some spreading, spread lime, worked in the shop in the winter. And I did learn a lot there. I mean, you learn, like you hear a lot of farm kids, that they need to go work somewhere else before they come back home and farm. I do believe that, because if you don't go do something else, all you know is the way things have always been done. And, I saw a lot of stuff that was different methods of farming that I'd never seen before. And especially different areas, like you go to northern Cass County up there, it is pure sand and muck. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. And
Yeah.
different ways of doing things, and you kind of learn what not to do on some of those. Did that for about 8 or 9 years. Mid-20s, I wanted to start farming on my own. Well, it's kind of hard to farm when you work at a fertilizer plant. It's you're busy at the same time.
Yeah.
So I went to driving a truck instead, and I hauled feed for 8 or 9 years. That worked out pretty good then. I had a boss that really understood, what my timing was, what I wanted to do. We're in the field, let me out early. We'd start 5 in the morning, and they'd usually work till 4 or 5 in the afternoon. If we were in the field, hell, some of them days he let me go at 10. So that worked pretty good.
Yeah. So were you hauling out
always
of
like
Florida
that
then?
kind of stuff, though. Just what's that?
Were you hauling out of Florida then?
Yeah, right there at that Flora plant. And north central Indiana, it was pretty much hour and a half from the mill. Everything was local. You get about 4 loads a day, 2 decently long loads, and 2 of them right there in the county. Of course, if anybody's familiar with Carroll County, southeastern Carroll County, there's a set of quads on every single corner. Every 640 acres has a set of quads on it, it seems like. So bunch of hogs down there. We got out, the family farm, we got out in 98, just like everybody else did. About the time I went to college, it was going to sell out and sell everything. And I remember hauling the last off with Dad, and I thought, this won't stick, we'll get back in. And I think it was that spring break, that first year I was at college, we came home and started pulling fences. It was like, hey, I think Dad's serious. We're not going to have hogs anymore. And that was it. I mean, we never dabbled in it after, never thought about putting a quad up or any of that stuff. So kind of went from hogs to trucking to farming. So went to full-time farming in 15. So it's been 10 years now. And it was a good time to step in there, about like we were talking earlier on Twitter of 2014, 2015. Things were really good. And then kind of went to dumpster there for a little while. So it makes you a little harder when you start off full-time, you quit a job, I can make it just fine, and the economy goes to crap. It makes you kind of toughen up a little bit. But I had 11 crops in by then. My first crop was 2004, and I think I was pretty fortunate then because I got 2 years of LDP and poor prices. I remember selling corn for, I think it was, the first year that I put a crop out was 2004, and I remember we sold the beans for $5.35. And I don't know how many other guests you get on here, but you're always going to remember your first crop, what you sold it for, what the yield was. And they made 63 bushel beans, and I think I sold them for $5.35. Corn the next year was like $2.47, I think, with like a 40-cent LDP on top of that. So, and then the third year, ethanol
were you playing the LDP game at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I just had 2 years of it, but just enough to kind of learn what it was, and then ethanol hit, and off we went. So that was the end of that LDP stuff.
I'm sure there's some people that are our age and older that remember where you would watch the close, like, oh no, the board went up, so let's pull the LDP today real quick. And
my granddad was not the best grain marketer. He always told me, sell at harvest, it's the best price you can get, which was totally wrong. We know that now. But he always thought that was to get that LDP. When we started forward contracting, you can catch that LDP at the time with what you forward contracted back in June or March or whenever. You're actually cheering for it to go down during harvest so you can catch that. So if you sold, your 247 with a 40-cent LDP, you got 280 at that time. And it was a game. I mean, I had several neighbors tell me, they wanted it going down during harvest. And when you're first learning to farm, it's like, what? Why? You want to sell it for higher, So 2 years of that, and then ethanol hit. Of course, we got the biggest ethanol plant, to my knowledge, east of the Mississippi. You can see it from the barn lot. So keeps the price good here. We get a good bid year round, and yeah, Anderson's and Climbers. So, but yeah, been farming 10 years on my own, full time, and then the biggest change for me, my uncle, which you met a few times, that everybody loved him, myself included. He had cancer and died 2 years ago, and it was right about 2 years ago. It was about the 1st of March. Is when we had his funeral. And you talk about a shock to the system. I mean, kind of had expectations of how we were going to move going forward. Him and my dad farmed together. They retired. Their last crop was that fall. He started getting sick that kind of fall into Christmas, and was in the hospital a lot in January. Got diagnosed finally in February, and he was gone the last day of February. So you talk about,
oh my,
he was quote unquote retired for about 2 months, and he passed away. And it was adenocarcinoma is what it's called. It's basically small intestine cancer, and very rare, extremely rare in men. Apparently, usually it's, if it shows up, it's in women. But never really knew what caused it or anything. But just a shock to the system of labor and a mentor and just everything in general. It's just, I'm still trying to overcome it. It's been 2 years now, and it's still not without its problems. So, anybody watching that, you think you got the plan going ahead. It's about like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, that's kind of how we were. I had the plan, everything was fine until he up and passed away. And that could be any of us. I'm 46 years old. I could die tonight too. So you see a lot of the estate planning and all that stuff. Pay attention, start kind of getting an idea in your head what you want. And it may go to plan, it may not. So we don't know what life's got in store for us. So other than that,
so did you grow up with your dad farming with your uncle?
Yeah. So it was like growing up for me. It was like I had two dads growing up, and uncle lived just up the road, was around every day, just like my dad was. Raised hogs. Probably had a couple hundred acres at the time for a grain farm, and yeah, it was great. I had, a lot of kids grew up with no dads. I had basically two dads growing up. One day he'd ride with dad, one day he'd ride with an uncle, and one of them was planting, one of them was working ground, one of them was in the combine, one of them was hauling. Yeah, it was just like I had two dads growing up, so it was great. And but yeah, it's row crop now. We don't have any livestock anymore, other than a few show pigs in the summertime. But other than that, straight up corn and beans, conventional till. I'm trying to till less than I used to, but yeah. Other than that, just kind of a plain old stereotypical what you think of a Midwest Hoosier row crop farm.
There you go, with no pigs. So when you made that transition from high school to a few semesters at Purdue and started trucking, starting a family, what was the dynamic with your dad and your uncle when you said, "Hey, I think I want to try and find some ground of my own"?
So it started off. It was like I said, 97 to 2004. You used to just work for wages. Just so many hours, keep track of your hours, and they pay you for help. I suppose that's like a lot of farms are. And then it was picked the worst farm. It was me and my brother at the time was back here too. Picked the worst farm. We started renting it. And they just told the landlady, "Hey, these guys like to start." She was a little old lady, real sweet. And it was 45 acres and 5 fields. So it was not the best farm we'd ever been across. But it was good enough that, it needed fence rows pushed back. It needed rocks picked up. It was good enough to learn on. So we're probably different than most farms as instead of, grandpa is farming, dad is farming, kid comes home from college, wants to farm, kid has to buy his way in. We never did that. It was never step into what they had. It was always start your own. We'll help you. They helped me a lot. And then, it was use their equipment on those acres. And then the idea was we will start buying our own equipment and
okay,
eventually change over. And it worked. I don't know how many other families do that. We've done some estate planning, and the person we worked with, I don't know if they'd ever seen that with anybody else. Well, they got to buy this. Nope, that's not the idea. You want a slow transfer changeover. So that was how it started. It was 45 acres. Had another farm up the road, could see it was going to come up for rent, got it rented, and it was kind of off to the races after that. So, and it was always to go rent whatever you want. You can use the stuff on however many acres you can find, get after it. So that's what we did.
Okay.
And then when they
And then
retired in 22,
started buying your own equipment.
yeah, started buying our own equipment. Towards the end, started trading some of their stuff in that they still had owned. Would trade it in on something nicer, and yeah, they're using my equipment on their acres. So as far as what's the right way to do it, I don't know if there's a right or wrong. If anybody listening is interested, I could probably give you some guidance of how we did it, and it seemed to work pretty good.
So are you in charge of everything that they used to farm now?
Yeah, right now it's just I run as an LLC, and it's me. It's a single member LLC. My dad and uncle, their last crop was 22. They were farming the owned acres, the family ground. So I went the first 20 years not farming any family ground. And then when they retired, I rented theirs. My aunt and some cousins have some other ground. And yeah, it's me. Dad's still around to help. He's there every day. I think that's kind of the way to do it. If you're a young guy coming to the Midwest, hopefully you got good parents or good farm partners that will let you use their equipment if you need to, and trade it for labor if you need to, whatever you need to do to make it where it's fair on both sides. And it just, everybody knows it's so expensive to get started in farming. It's, you go buy a tractor or a combine, and that might be 10 years of your profit right now. So if you can use equipment and get help and guidance, try to do that. And then the other good thing was start on the small acres, the worst acres. If you screw up, it's not that big of a deal. It's not like turn over the reins to somebody that's 1,000 acres or whatever and say, here, don't screw it up. You've already got some years in there farming smaller acres that, I sold it too cheap, or I planted it too wet, or I picked the wrong hybrid, or whatever it is. There's ways to learn on the small acres first and then take off. But you see so many times nowadays where guys, they want to get in and there's no patience. There's absolutely no patience on these guys, that they want the boomers to get out and go away. And, I don't know if us Gen X are going to be any different, but you look at how many guys did go from basically a farm kid to a full-time farmer. And there's probably a day job in there for 20 years or 25 years that they worked. I'm no different. It was right at 20 years, I guess. So it's tough.
Well, I had a discussion. Yeah. Well, I had a discussion with a couple from north central Kansas last week. And they're 20, there'd be some my kids' age, so 25, graduated from college in 19, 20, somewhere around there. And they're working for, he's working for his dad, and he and his brother work for, they got cattle and crops. So he's working for wages for them. They bought their own farm, so he's got his own cows. He's working his own stuff, but he started small too. And I think that we have a problem in ag, and I saw a couple TikToks on it, and the hair in the back of my neck started standing up. That off-farm job is looked down upon, and I think the people in your situation, coming right out of college, and mine coming from nothing, is we need to consider that off-farm job, particularly for people starting to farm, as a form of diversification. When you think about you growing up, you were diversified on your parents' farm because you had hogs, and you were even more diversified because you were thorough to finish, and then you had the crops. And when you started to farm, you were diversified because you were working with your family, which helped your diversification. You had your own crop, and then you got this paycheck that can help with other things. Is that am I completely off base on that?
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's almost looked down upon, but by the same token, it's looked down upon by the same guys that did it. I don't begrudge that to anybody. I did it.
That's right.
From 2000 to 2014 or whatever it was, for about 20 years, and whether it be livestock, mechanics, you truck on the side, you sell seed, whatever they are, I don't think it's any different if you just got a day job that, it's like you said, it's probably got benefits, probably got a nice steady paycheck, hopefully if you can get the hours to work like I did when I was trucking feed, that was great.
Yeah.
I say that was like early morning to mid afternoon, and then you farm all the way till the time the grain terminal closes. So livestock, it'd be harder to do that. You can't get up and go to work, and
Yeah.
cows or hogs don't get fed. But if you got the will and the drive and the want to work and the ability that, hey, I'm going to spend a lot of hours on the farm that maybe the rest of the family's going to have to sacrifice a little, well, that's part of it. So if you're thinking
Well, that's
40
part of
hours a week,
the
it's probably not for you. So
yeah. I was thinking about today. I spent an hour and a half in the lamb barn working with some sheep, moving some stuff around, feeding. My son and I are going to go out and do another thing when we're done recording. So I'll probably have 3 hours out in the lamb barn on a Sunday. It's just
yeah,
kind of what you
we're
do.
probably down at the hog barn today for 2 to 3 hours. So, and that's something farming too. When you're self-employed, take the kids with you. That's whereas some of these other day jobs you can't. You can't have them in the office with you all day, or you got young kids or kids that are on spring break or whatever, or fall break. Take them with you. Let them see what you do. You could probably have them help, and then when they do get old enough to help, hey, they're already trained. They kind of know what's going on. So yeah, if you can, obviously be safe. We've heard about kids getting caught in augers and stuff for ran over, but safety first. But take them along with you and let them learn what you do.
Oh yeah. So you have 4 children, correct?
4 girls. Yep. My last 2 girls are twins.
Yeah.
They were supposed to be the boy, but I got 2 girls instead. So I thought, oh man, if we start having an extra one every time, we better quit. So
you better quit. Yeah, there you go. And your oldest is what, 22, 23?
She's older than that. She's like 26, and she's got a baby that's about
Oh, geez.
a year and a half. So I actually got one grandkid that's a girl. So I don't know what we're going to ever do to get away from girls around here, but something.
Well, there's something in your genetics, man.
I guess. I don't know. So, and that's kind of the thing you see about women in ag. Large conversation. You've had conversations on your podcast about women in ag. When you get 4 girls, that's what you got. There's no picking. So if they're going to farm, they're going to farm. That's what it is. So they can do everything a man can do. I think I'm trying to raise them to do everything.
Well,
a man
and I
can
think
do,
about,
so.
And you bring up a good point. And I think about my grandmother and when she helped on the farm. My grandfather farmed. They had an 80, and then at his peak, he was probably farming 150, 170 acres, rented some ground from the neighbors. But he worked second shift at the Jack factory in Butler, Indiana, Universal Tool.
Yeah.
And my grandmother would help. But the help was a lot different because he put beans in a granary, he put corn in a corn crib. They had a sheller, so the help was manual labor.
Yeah.
Whereas now, what kind of a percentage of heavy duty manual labor do you do on a farm compared to what your dad did just 40 years ago?
Yep, that's an excellent point. Especially if you don't have livestock, if you're just row crop farming, it makes no gender if you're a man or a woman anymore. There honestly is not much physical labor or stuff that a smaller person can't do that there was 20 or even 40 years ago. Stuff's got auto steer, drives itself. It's never been easier than it is right now. So that's why people are farming older, and that's why, like I say, you could be a man or a woman. It doesn't matter now. And my middle daughter, she runs a grain cart most of fall. Does a great job. She's probably got more patience than any of us men on it. So, yeah.
But you think about the things on a farm that we consider the $100 an hour jobs or $1,000 an hour jobs. Bookwork, marketing, making the right chemical decisions beforehand. It's not turning a wrench for the most part that's making you $100 well, let's take that back. It's not pulling out fence that's making $100 an hour.
Right.
It's not picking up rocks that's making $100 an hour.
Right.
So what you need to do those $100 an hour jobs is a brain.
Yeah. Just think if everybody sold their grain 50 cents more, how different it'd be, just for the revenue on the bottom line. That's probably one of the things most of us struggle with is grain marketing. That's pretty universal. Guys are good at
I
it. Even the
think
ones that are
universally
real
we
good at
suck.
it, they still don't think they're good enough. So, but yeah,
Mhm.
the turning wrenches and working on old pieces of crap, there's still some of that out there. But a lot of the big farms anymore, they're farming with stuff under warranty. They don't even have to call
Mhm.
for parts or anything. It's still under warranty. They just call the dealer and get it fixed. Some of the big operations. So
Yeah, they have a
I think it's
half a
probably
million
easier now
dollar
than it's ever
shop so
been
that they
for
can keep their
women
stuff
to get in.
clean.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're not running new stuff. I wish I was, but we still got to fix a lot of stuff on farm ourselves. I did start hiring a combine to go through at the shop, at the deer shop. And reason being
Mhm.
there, it's fall and it's time to go. I don't want to work on it. I want to put fuel in it. I want to check the oil,
Yeah.
put def in it, and go. I don't want to have to work on it. And it's expensive in the off season, but man, the little stuff does not seem to catch up in season. You just put fuel in it and go.
Mhm. We can get prepared. So yeah, that makes sense. That falls into the ones $100 an hour kind of job. Get the combine inspected so you can roll when you need to roll.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's like, let's just say it's $10 an acre, for combine maintenance. That seems like it's not that much. It's only $10 times every acre. It's like, wow, that adds up pretty quick then. But when it keeps you running, I mean, we've had stuff where when I did work a job, it seemed like we had a 9500 that every day when I would clock out and get home from work, it's not moving. It's in the field getting worked on, where it made it three-fourths of the
Yeah.
day and something would break. And then the next day, I'd repeat again. I'd show up at the field and it's like, what now? A belt broke or a bearing went out or just small stuff, just radiator leak. I mean, it was just something all the time. And that was
Yeah.
20 some years ago. They've been going to the shop. Of course, we ran two combines for a while when my uncle was here, and went back to one big one.
So you had
But
double the trouble.
yeah, it was, if one of them was running, you'd be doing good. So started putting them through the shop, and a lot of that stuff kind of goes away. So
Yeah. Our
trucks
combine's
anymore.
sitting over at Home Myers in Payne, and it's got $11,000 worth of stuff to do to it. And
Yep. It adds up
yeah,
quick by
one
the
of
time you
them.
do the labor and the parts. But I mean, if it keeps you
Oh
moving,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
trucks
And then
anymore
of
is a
course
money
we're
pit.
farmers.
You got one semi, you
Oh
know how
my
that is. Those
goodness.
things are money pits. So
Oh yes. Oh yes. Thankfully we have a mechanic that moonlights that helps us quite a bit. So
those
but
things.
yeah,
There's always
anything with
something. There's a valve leaking or an antifreeze leak or a brake sticking or something is always wrong with them.
Mhm.
The light doesn't work. So we run five trucks and trailers in the fall.
Oh
So
geez.
it's like typically if four of the five are running, I'm doing good.
Yes, there you go. The last fall we had an air dryer go out on ours and it leaked like a sieve and I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
And he came out and he's like, "Oh, I'll be back in 20 minutes." Went to town, got it, and screwed it on. I'm going, holy crap! I could have done that, but it was worth it because he knew how
Yep.
to fix it. I did.
Yep.
So, do you think your upbringing and watching your mom help her on the farm and your dad work with the hogs and his uncle were those lessons? Did they help you with the resilience to be patient and sit back and work at Pepsi and then work at the feed mill and work at the co-op before jumping in and saying, "Yeah, let's let's put all our risk to putting seed in the ground"?
Yeah. So stuff I learned growing up, like I said, resilience and grit is probably the two things. You were up on a hog farm where stuff wasn't new. It was old tractors, it was old gates, it was old fences. You had to fix a lot of stuff then. Hey, it teaches you to be a mechanic. Hell, you're a pretty good mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not that you want to work on this stuff, but you got to get it fixed or it ain't going to work. Feed grinders down, hogs aren't going to eat. You got to get it fixed. So learned a lot
Yeah.
there of just resiliency. Patience is not my strong suit. Through my dad's side of the family, we don't have patience. So that's kind of a learned behavior for me. It takes trying every day to stay patient. I don't know if viewers or listeners, I got red hair. You know what the saying is there for if they got red hair, they don't have any patience. So,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, I think just And I think a lot of farm kids in general, even just row crop farm kids, they kind of understand that. You got to get the planter going to get stuff planted, or resilience of just you're going to have to do it or it ain't going to get done.
Yeah. And that's a theme that I've covered quite a bit on with guests that we learn. It's there's some things you can put off tomorrow, a lot of things you can't. So get up and get them done.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
So what are your plans for 2025 for your crops? Are you heavy corn, heavy beans?
2025 is going to be pretty much just flip and go on this year. Didn't change any acres. I'm balanced just about 50-50 soybeans and corn. Thought about cutting back some inputs. Late last fall, it was not looking very good. And let's just plan on doing what we do, and we'll adjust later. Maybe the grain will rally a little bit. And sure enough, it did. So got a bunch of the old crops sold. And as far as the farming practice, we're going to do just like we always do. We're typically shooting for yield. We don't throw a lot of the micros and that kind of stuff compared to a lot of people, I guess, but we do some of it. I've never been one to jump in first on anything. The old early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. So kind of never really run into stuff.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Usually kind of not dead last to adopt something, but I'm usually never first. So kind of wait and see what everybody else reports on some of this stuff, if it works out or not, and maybe adopt it down the road. But yeah, kind of go along with that. I saw a quote there a while back. It was watch your own bobber. It was one thing that kind of made sense to me too. Was doesn't really matter to me what somebody else is doing. Do what's best for yourself and go on and learn from your own mistakes. And I've got a few friends and neighbors that farm. We bounce ideas off each other, but usually for something too crazy, one of us will call out and say, "Hey, maybe you want to do that on small acres first." But yeah, kind of just doing our thing. We till every acre except for 200 acres of rocks down by the river. You try not to even put anything in the dirt down there for as rocky as it is. But yeah, other than that, just go along.
And where we are with crop prices and inputs, that's probably a smart thing to do. Just kind of hunker down and keep the status quo.
It broke loose here last week. I don't know how it was in your area, but it got dry about Tuesday. We're filming this on Sunday, and there was about 4 days. It was busy. There was a lot of ammonia tanks up and down the road. A lot of guys started manure. Lots of dry fertilizer going on. So there's stuff happening. It's not like people are cutting out everything, but did see a little bit of tillage, kind of spot tillage, along end rows and stuff like that. But yeah, it got started here for 4 days hard, then it rained. So maybe it'll be in early spring again. Of course, we're dry underneath. It dried out. I hauled lime a couple days and got a semi in the field, and it was firm just like it is in the fall. So it's plenty dry.
Well, we'll see what Mother Nature throws at us. I saw a few people throwing some dry on this week. We're just enough. Our indicator, if it's dried up, is that the Amish start putting in hay ground, and I haven't seen anybody turn in any ground for hay.
Yeah.
I bet we would have this week, but this rain's going to set us back.
Usually here you start seeing ammonia wagons first. That's kind of the first thing you see. And then dry spreaders and social media, some guys putting beans in. I didn't see anything locally. I don't have the planter out of the barn yet, so I do have some
I've still got to order stuff from Shoop.
Yeah. Takes a couple days to get here, so.
That's right. Yeah.
I did get the first shipment of seed in Friday, so I do have some seed on hand anyway.
Oh, cool. We're blessed that our Pioneer dealer, we buy all our beans from, treat all our beans on site.
Yeah.
So we don't have to take inventory, at least the soybeans ahead of time, which is really nice. Yeah. We'll probably get our corn here in the next 3 weeks, but
we got a cold barn. We'll take everything in pro boxes, stack it over there, and then it used to be years ago you just kind of threw it in the barn and went on. Well, anymore, how many hours a day or minutes a day do you spend sorting through boxes? So preseason, I always come up with a list of corn, a list of beans. Here's the fields I want to start in. Here's the hybrids that go in them. Make a copy and put in each ground working tractor where everybody knows here's how we're going to go through things. And then I'll stack it in the shed that way too, where as long as the weather holds up like I think it's going to, stuff will come out in order. We just pull in and grab what's next and go.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, just little things to try to speed stuff up and eliminate mistakes of, I put the wrong corn in the wrong field. So,
hey, we don't want that one. And yeah. So we started off talking about a little bit of how your uncle passed away and had transitioned. Have you started talking about transition planning with your family?
Yeah, I mean, there's been discussions.
For you?
There's no solid plan yet, no, as far as what's going to happen. But as far as my own, I kind of got in my head of what I want to do for my kids. So I don't know. It's a discussion that every family needs to have, and none of them want to have it. I don't know any families that get excited about it.
But do you have anything on paper?
Yeah, there's some things on paper. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. Well, I think that's a message. I'm glad you brought it up. It wasn't intended, but I think it's a message that more in ag need to talk about. And I'm not talking about the intricacies of fairness and equality and all that. I'm just talking about get something on paper. Because like you said, your uncle died 4 months after he quote unquote retired.
Yeah.
And you could die today. I could die.
It was very sudden. And that's one thing farming is, I don't know any other business that's like that. That, let's say mom and dad have a drugstore in town. They don't expect their kids to take over and run it. Or if mom and dad's got a machine shop, they don't expect the son to take over and run it. If he does, well, that's great. But, farming, it's like it's expected that it has to keep going generation. And I don't know any other company that does that. And actually, we went on vacation a couple of years ago. And I ran into a guy on one of those resorts. It was in the Caribbean. And he was from Connecticut. And I had absolutely nothing in common with this guy. We were sitting at a hibachi bar while they're grilling our food.
Okay.
And he had never, ever met a farmer. And, you talk about advocating or whatever, where you talk to people. This guy had no idea anything about farming and was just amazed at stuff I was telling him. And told him all about it. And he actually he had a chain of nursing homes up in the Northeast. And it was amazing to me, the similarities, because he said he had two sons. One of them went to be an investment banker. I mean, you're talking, the high wealth right outside New York City area is where he was. One of them went to be an investment banker, and the other one, I think he said, was a superintendent for a school or something. And he started talking about, I had this successful chain of nursing homes. Neither one of them wanted to do it. I didn't feel like I needed to make them do it. So I just cashed out early and retired early. So, I mean, this guy had been all over the world traveling. He didn't have an 80 or two. He had apparently some bucks tucked away where he could do whatever he wanted and pretty much go on vacation year round. But the idea that wanted his sons to take it over and go, and they didn't. So he said, I just cashed in and here I am. So, they're successful on their own. But yeah, he was absolutely amazed at, telling him stuff about farming, no idea what stuff yields per acre. Is it a truckload an acre? Is it a bucket per acre? He didn't have any idea. Didn't know what corn and beans even were used for.
Oh my.
So yeah, that was an eye-opening experience for me in many ways.
I'm sure it was. That was neat. You could have that conversation with him.
Yeah, and it was the fall before Trump round 2. So he started talking about politics, and you got a wealthy guy in Connecticut and a farm boy in Indiana, probably not going to be the same political party. So there was a lot of conversation at that table that was very fun to listen to. I'll always remember that conversation with that guy.
That's neat. But I think the difference between a nursing home in Connecticut and an 80 where your great-grandfather built a barn outside of Burrows is completely different. And I think that adds to the intricacies that we have in ag when you talk about succession planning.
Yeah. And farming is always this romantic profession. You see the pictures of sunsets and tractors, and you don't see that everywhere else. You don't see a a cart being wheeled up a nursing home aisle or anything. It's
No,
farming is
hey, do
this
you remember the
romanticized
first time you
profession
got an
because,
electric adjust bed?
yeah, I mean, farming's got this where somebody's always got a connection to it. Your granddad farmed,
Yes.
your uncle farmed, your brother-in-law farms, or in rural Indiana, everybody's connected to a farm some way. But as far as those active in it, it's not very much.
Mm-hmm. And understand that, oh crap, I'm going to put in 1,000 acres of corn, and I hope I only lose $20 an acre.
Yeah.
Or make
Yeah.
$20 or whatever the number is.
Yeah. I think the thing too about farming, we talked about getting started and the money it takes to get started and the patience it takes to get started. Everybody wants to just step in at 21 years old and be BTO and going. It takes a while. And that's one thing. I think it was on Facebook last week. Somebody had a question about it, and it was, I don't remember what the topic was, but I remember commenting, row crop farmers, for the most part, they really get rolling about the time our counterparts in the other sectors are thinking about retiring. When guys are hitting 55, 60, that's usually when they're up and rolling and got some acres and maybe got some part-time help and they're covering some acres at that time. It took them 20 years to get there. They're really going to go for the next 20 years, Other industries, they're thinking, hell, if I socked some away, I could probably retire at 58, 59. So farming is very odd compared to everything else. And I think the older I get, the more you kind of look at things and, not that I want to change, but it makes you realize different things like, 46 even. It's like, man, if I worked 10 more years in another industry, I'd probably be thinking of retiring. Well,
if you were in the military, you'd be retired by now.
Yeah. I have two friends that were military and cops and they're retired. They're on their second career already. They retired like
now they're farming.
Yeah, they're not farming. One of them's helping a farmer, but yeah, 20 years in the military or a cop and they retired. So, I mean, it's different what life hands you. Farming, though, is, the stereotypical, grandpa's 80 and dad's 60 and he just takes over when grandpa dies. And it's like everybody else kind of wants to retire about 60.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think in some of those cases, that 55-year-old that's just hitting the ground, dad just finally let him run the corn planter last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's the stuff you hear about. And it's like, 55, 60 in any other industry, that's not starting, that's ending.
Yeah. Well, I think that some of that goes to just the older generation. And I don't mean I don't have a better way to describe it. Needing to let go a little bit and understand that, it is time to retire.
Yeah. But I think a lot of that is
a safety factor.
About, it's easier now than it's ever been to row crop farm where they've already done the stuff that was hard. They had non-Roundup beans and pulled weeds and cultivated. And, hey, it's pretty easy when you get there now. You just call the co-op and you say, hey, spray it, spread it. You got auto steer in the tractor. Yeah. It's easier now than it's ever been.
Yeah, you call your grandkid to set it up so you know where to put the AV line and go.
Yeah, get that AV line set up and let's roll. But yeah, it's easier now than it's ever been. So,
yeah. And we got some safety mechanisms in place that make it easier for somebody to run the equipment at 75 and 80.
Yeah,
which is
a lot of times it's just getting in and out of the vehicle is the toughest one. You crawl up a 9-step ladder to a combine or whatever, you're about whipped by the time you get up there if you're 80 years old. So, but there's a few around here doing it. I mean, I know some guys in my local area are still in their 80s farming.
Yeah. I helped a farmer in Iowa where we used the front end loader on a new Massey Ferguson to lift his dad up to the combine.
Yeah.
And he sat in there all day long. And you had to be careful if you were helping grease the combine and walked around and the wind was blowing in a direction because you'd get a golden shower and not enjoy it.
That's one thing all of us, we never disclose or show the pictures on Twitter or social media. You get down, you're supposed to walk around that combine every time, look for bearings out, check for, your spread pattern and make sure you're not losing grain.
Yeah.
Every one of us has got out and just stood off the ladder before and went and just kept going.
That's right. Yeah.
I tried to get on the ground.
Yellow streak in the field. Yeah, that's right. don't let the truth out, Jason.
Yeah. You're supposed to get down and check it every time you get out to pee.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, that makes us operators, not steering wheel holders.
Yeah, that's the difference. Is if you get off your machine to pee, that's the difference between an operator and a driver.
There you go. So, do your older daughters have any interest in coming back and helping you? You said your one runs a grain cart.
Yeah, my oldest daughter actually married a farmer in Cass County on the other side of the county. He farms, comes from a farm family. Good kid, like him. And then middle daughter, her boyfriend, I was actually one of his dad's best friends back in school. And he drives a truck for me in the fall, and as needed, if I had something today, I could call either one of them today, and they'd come help me with it. So younger girls are only in 8th grade, so who knows what they're going to do going forward, but they like hanging out and riding in the fall and all that stuff. They're interested in it. So, yeah. But
so
it's like we talked about, you don't want
to be determined for Scott Farm
Company. Do something else. Go do something else. But, if it's interested in it, well, we'll try to figure out how to keep it going. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, your oldest works in Lafayette still,
too.
Right?
We do have a little bit of livestock. There's a couple of chickens here at the house.
There you go. He's saying it's time to feed me. Come on, Jason.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on. I don't know. It was nice and quiet here for a little bit, but
there you go. That's the first time we've had a cock interrupt the podcast.
Yeah. He's making noise out there. Egg prices, it's like they need to start laying again. So usually in the wintertime,
come on, turn the lights on. We need some eggs.
Yeah, we don't have any lights out there for them, so no eggs in the winter. But then when it gets warm again, they did start laying again last week. So
okay. So as you go forward and you think of your daughters coming back, and maybe if they're spouses, do you have any ideas of how you want that to work, or is it too soon to have those thoughts?
Like we alluded to earlier, I think the way I did it would probably be the right way to do it. Just take something and here. You guys go start renting that instead. So both of them come from farm families. I don't know what their situation is going to be. It's not that far away. Even both of them's within like 10, 15 miles. So it's not like they're from Iowa.
Oh, geez, that's nothing anymore.
Like that. So, yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, it seems like 27, something happens when you turn 27 that you start seeing things a little clearer. You kind of get in your head. Maybe that's why you got to be 27 to be, in Congress. I don't know. 27, something happens where you start seeing life a little clearer, where you're not really a kid anymore.
Yeah.
So
you had a couple years for your brain to be fully developed.
Along, and I can see it being probably similar to what I was as far as changing over. And right now, if they said, "Hey, we rented a 40 or something somewhere, take the stuff and go farm it." There's nothing in place, but by all means, go knock yourself out. So,
well, it's nice that you've got that same mentality of we're open to what might happen.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing in place right now, but I don't know. We'll see. 46 years old, it's time to start thinking about it. So,
I mean, if you think about the normal world, you're thinking about your stock options and how much of the company you own and how you're going to transition to stock. And you're probably got a 14, 15-year plan where I'm going to be out of here by 60.
Yeah. I mean, typically you think of 40 crops. You're going to put out and harvest 40 crops. Well, I'm 21 into it. So I'm on the downhill side of it. And I'm still considered a somewhat young
farmer. And it's getting easier.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of think of a young farmer.
Yeah, we are. Yeah,
yeah.
But I think at the same time that I caught myself having this thought the other day. So I'm going to be 54 this year. 54. So we're not that far apart. But I was thinking about, okay, what if we do this and what if we do that and we add this? It was thoughts like I had 15 years ago. So those thoughts haven't gone away. So I guess we're still in a growth mentality. I'm not sitting here going, man, I need to wind down. I still got to talk to my banker paying some bills. So
Yeah, I think that's, you look at social media and stuff where guys are trying to start, and it's, why is the BTO always got to get land or whatever? Well, the BTO now was that guy 20, 25, 30, 40 years ago that wondered how he's
Mhm.
going to get that land. They've
Yeah.
been there. Not everybody got handed the silver spoon and took off on, here's a couple thousand acres, go knock yourself out. A lot of that stuff took 40 years to build. Like we discussed, hey, you're reaping the benefits of it
Mhm.
now. That's why guys don't quit. It did take a long time to build. So it's about like making a cake. You go and you get your ingredients and you get all that stuff. Well, when you get it all done, you're going to eat it, and you're going to eat it slow and enjoy it.
There you go. Yeah. And those guys that are in their 60s and 70s that
Yeah.
are at the end of their career but got large acreage, they grew up on open calves. They grew up
Yes,
cultivating. They grew up walking
absolutely.
beans. That's what they started. So this
Absolutely.
auto steer and Roundup Ready, Liberty Link, the nice things we have,
Yeah.
they farmed before that.
That's one thing that I think my age and your age, we got into that pre-biotech era just enough to experience it.
Mm-hmm.
When I worked at co-op, we sprayed, you know, uh, Flexstar infusion on
Uh-huh.
tons of acres. And
Yeah.
of course, the beans were about brown before you left the field. And you see
Oh
stuff
yeah.
about
If you
guys
didn't
going
have
back
brown
to,
beans at once,
yeah, it was like 2 years
yeah.
and then Roundup beans hit. And you see it going back to it now where some guys are
Mm-hmm.
trying different things and even just water hemp control, trying to spray different stuff on it.
Yeah.
I don't think the world is prepared to see what happens to some of those beans when you spray them with those products. It looks ugly for a long time. Usually comes out of it, but you can kill them on the end rows. You know, pre Roundup beans, as
Having those
far as in my lifetime, what's the number one thing that probably changed farming the most? And it was Roundup beans, because it was a pain in the butt to grow beans before that. I mean, you moldboard
Mhm.
plowed it, and then you had buttonweed out there, velvet leaf, and grass
Oh
everywhere.
yeah.
And you'd spray Treflan or
Mhm.
Prowl or just all kinds of stuff on it, and you still have weedy beans. Roundup
Yep.
hits, and I think we were probably the same as everybody else. The 40 acres behind my house back here, we put it out first 1 year. Let's go try these Roundup beans. Hopefully the beans don't die. Let's
Mm-hmm.
try them. Everybody did the same thing. You put one farm to it, the next year, the whole farm was Roundup beans. As much seed as you can get. That next year, it was hard to even get the seed to cover it, but it
Yep.
took off and went. And then, I remember spraying at the co-op
Oh, yeah.
Roundup One corn. It was a total failure. I don't know if anybody else remembers that or not,
Mm-hmm.
but there was lightning corn, there was Emmy corn, Roundup corn came along, and we tried to treat it just like it was with beans. You didn't put any pre down. You let the corn come up, and then you think Roundup's just going to go kill off everything. And when I ran that sprayer, it was a Rogator sprayer. The acres that tried that, you could not even see corn in them. I radio back to the boss. I'm like, I'm going to run over a bunch because I can't see it. And he goes, hell, don't worry about it. There's no corn under it anyway. So you got waist high giant rag with knee high corn under it. You're supposed to be spraying it. That's why Roundup One corn did not work. We tried to treat it like it was soybeans. It wasn't the same. You still
Mm-hmm.
had to put a pre in. You still had to put some other stuff with it. So, and then the seed corn industry. I can remember the years I worked there in the early 2000s or whenever that was, probably around 2000. And it was Cruiser. You remember that on seed? Cruiser and Cruiser
Uh-huh.
Max. And it was
Yep.
I think it was Roundup corn, and it was seed treatment for Roundup or for rootworm on it. And it was real crusty. You couldn't even get the flow
Mm-hmm.
through the planters. And I remember, most of the stuff at that time was bags. I remember the seed salesman up there, I worked in the warehouse moving seed. And he says, do not poke one of those bags. That corn is $100 a bag. And now it's list like what 400, you net 250 to
Yeah.
300 a bag. And at that time,
Mm-hmm.
it was like, don't rip it. It's $100 a bag.
Yeah.
And it was treated with all that stuff. So,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
that's what's
But can
changed
you
in our life.
imagine? Oh yeah. And I remember the man I helped in high school that I went to meet with the seed dealer or chemical dealer, and we wrote on the prescription, which was just his notepad. I
Yeah,
forget. I don't remember what the chemicals were, but and at the bottom it says, "You will have brown beans.
yeah,
Don't call me unless they turn black."
yeah. It's probably Cobra.
So can you imagine picking up a new landlord or talking to somebody, one of your landlords, when you hit them hard with Flex Star and maybe put a little 28 in there to burn it and definitely put in some crop oil and you've got brown beans? Can you
Oh
imagine
yeah.
the phone calls that you're going to get? Hey, you
Oh
killed
yeah.
my beans.
I don't think a lot of people have even seen that, but you start getting some of these water hemp
Mm,
problems. Around here, water hemp's gone crazy. I mean, in rows,
yeah.
it is just hard to control. Even putting pre down and everything else, that stuff is a super weed. It is very hard to
Yeah.
control. But if we start going back to that stuff, yeah, I don't think today's generation, you spray an enlist bean and it droops and then it's back to normal the next day. But brown, looking like it's going to die for about 5 days, and then it comes out of it.
Yep.
So
It
yeah, it
cupped
was no
up
fun
and
spraying in the late
yeah.
'90s. And of course, back then
No.
flushing all the time. There was days you'd
Yep.
spray regular corn, you'd spray Emmy corn, which was lightning, which is basically pursuit. You sprayed on your
Uh-huh.
beans. It was tolerant on corn. I think you can still get it actually. And then there was Liberty corn. Of course, you had to change your tips to spray 20-gallon on it, and then you maybe get a
Uh-huh.
little bit of Roundup corn in and go back. So, like, I remember there was days I got flushed out 4 or 5 times a day in the middle of summer trying to spray all that. You try to kind of group it where you had 4 or 5
Mm-hmm.
customers that had this. Okay, this day you're going to spray it, but they might be on total ends of the county. So it's like either you're going to flush and stay close, or you're going to just spend your day driving. Driving a
Yeah.
sprayer 30 mile an hour all across 5 county area is not fun either. So it's definitely nice when everybody plants the same stuff and has the same traits, and even just for your neighbors where you're not drifting on them or anything like that. But the co-op, I'm sure it's a lot easier for them instead of it used to just be flush all the time.
Yep. Oh. But then what you do with all that flush, oh, it's just a pain. And now you with the when you were with Roundup, like just start spraying in this corner of the county and go.
Yeah. And it's the end of pure Roundup beans, straight Roundup beans for us. We started adding residual in. We put like Authority down or whatever
Mm-hmm.
pre-product you wanted to, and that worked for a while. You started to get some escapes, and there was one year we
Yep.
actually had dicamba beans, enlist beans, uh, the GT27 beans. I don't know if those are even still available. They were Roundup and Liberty, and regular Liberty beans. We had 4 types of beans one year, and I was never so stressed spraying that stuff. It was like never
Mm-hmm.
again. It's always going to be the same trait from now on. Whatever trait wins, that's what we're going to do. And we had those 4 1 year, and my God, it was horrible. You had to change. You finished the field, you made sure the planter was sucked out totally empty, put the other
Mm-hmm.
stuff in it, clean it out good. It was almost like seed beans or whatever. And spraying was the same way. So Enlist did win out that year for us, so that seemed to be the easiest one that worked the best. So that's how we went to Enlist.
Do you think the adaptation of dicamba beans at the instead of enlist beans hurt our water hemp problem or resistance problem?
I don't know if it hurt it, but you know, the ability to kill bigger weeds probably hurt it more than anything. Because 240 or dicamba, you can spray it on a pretty good sized water hemp plant and it'll take it down. Well, I think people learn that and they let it go a little too long instead of try to not even let them grow out there. It's almost like the Roundup beans back in the day. Hell, let the stuff get waist high, preferably knee high, but it'll take down stuff that's waist high. I think we fell into that, and then trying to find a time to spray it. If you're spraying a good pre, it's going to be on before the beans come up. Either you're hiring it done or you're
Mm-hmm.
spraying on the planter, or like I do, you try to make time to you know, plant 2 days, you might take another day and go spray. If you got labor to do it,
Yeah.
hopefully you can get it done, on time. But the good pre's, they got to be on before the beans come up.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that the enlist, we still got some people that are shortening that pre, and it's at all of ours expense. And what does a
Yeah,
pre cost per acre? $15, $20? It's
yeah,
not
it's around
not
18 a lot of
huge,
times.
so yeah. So you got a bushel and a half, 2 bushels of beans worth of pre on there to save us a headache down the road. I mean, it's a no brainer for us.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of it's
Well,
weather.
Jason,
If you
we've had
spray it and you
a
get a nice quarter-inch rain on it,
which we usually do in Indiana.
but
We get those rains all Nice small
Oh yeah,
half-inch rains every 3 or 4 days.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, we've had a good conversation and it went a little different direction than I expected. So this is great. So we end
Cool.
every conversation with 5 questions, and you've been exposed to them, I bet. So I'm going to throw them at you and see how they compare with other people's. So the first question is, what is one lesson from ag that you carry with you every day?
I would say back to what we discussed earlier, probably resilience and grit. That
Mm-hmm.
you got to do it, or it's not going to get done.
Doing those tough things.
Yep.
If you don't do it, it won't get done. So I think that's a great one.
Yep. All that stuff is not fun, but it
If
needs done, so you do it anyway.
I remember that farmer I helped in high school, he had a batch of atrazine sitting in that Demco sprayer, the 45 footer with the booms that folded behind it. And
Oh yeah.
he said, I'm going to the house to get us some coat hangers. I'm like, why in the hell are we needing coat hangers? Yeah, I
Start
found it real
digging.
quick. What's this
Yep.
white gunk coming out of here? Yeah, that's
Yep.
atrazine.
For sure.
But if we didn't clean it out, we wouldn't be spraying. If
Yep.
you could sit down and have coffee with any historical figure in ag, who would it be?
Any historical figure in ag? Um, Not real sure on that one. Probably, probably the man John Deere himself, I guess. If it was something you could go back and say, you're going to start something that's going to change the farming industry, I bet that man would
Mm-hmm.
be blown away to see what his company is today.
I think he'd be blown away it's still around.
Yeah, I mean, just I think he probably thought he had his plow works, and I'm not sure exactly when he died what it was, what the lead product was. I don't know if they were in the tractors then or not, but yeah, probably John Deere himself, because that's one man that's
Yeah.
definitely changed the way we do things.
Yes, he did. And the thing about him, and you can throw in Cyrus McCormick and you can throw in Oliver
Yeah,
and Eli Whitney. They did all that without a computer, without a slide rule. It was just
yep.
brain
Grit,
power.
brain power, and grit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you know that none of them succeeded on the first prototype.
Right. Yep. But
What is
I think
one
even his drive.
underappreciated?
What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
No,
think
go ahead.
Deere. One of the things his though was the drive to make things easier. That's still alive and well today. Any kind of ag company or
Mm-hmm.
even farmers ourselves, we want to do things easier. Don't do things the tough way because that's the way it's always been done. Let's figure out some way to make it easier to go ahead and do it.
Yeah. And you think about him trying to get that sticky black prairie soil off that plow. I mean, that
Oh
definitely
yeah,
made things easier. Yeah. And his legacy of making things easier now extends to having a refrigerator in the cab. So you don't have to worry about spilling ice.
yeah. Oh yeah. All the comforts of home in
Sorry,
the
just a
tractor
little
cab.
sarcasm there. Yeah. The comforts of home. That's right. What is one underappreciated or quirky thing about farming that more people should know?
Um, what was the last part of that? The world needs to know. Is that what you said?
That more people should know.
Oh, more people should know. It takes a lot of capital and it takes a lot of patience, and none of those things
Mm-hmm.
are just instant. Like I said, I really struggle with patience on a lot of things, and farming is expensive. I mean, I'm not sure of any other industry that, like I said, you put out $1 million of inputs and whatever and hope to get 100,000 back. It takes a bunch of money to do it. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the line of credit and the mortgage that I have on our acreage is more than I think all of my aunts and uncles ever paid for a house. Yeah, it's crazy. It is crazy.
Very capital intensive.
What is your favorite ag related tool, product, or innovation?
Probably back to what we discussed, Roundup beans. If I had to pick one thing that really changed farming, probably Roundup beans.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that's
I
been
think
30
Roundup
years ago,
beans.
and it's kind of, straight Roundup beans are a thing of the past now. But that really changed how we did a lot of stuff. So
And I think that Roundup beans made us realize that beans were more than just the alternative to corn, at
yeah,
least for a
it did.
time.
It did.
Yeah.
In my lifetime, we haven't really doubled corn yield yet, but we've easily doubled bean yield. Weedy beans around here used to be
Mm-hmm.
35, 40 bushel. Now you can grow
Okay.
75 and
And now
80.
you're talking 80s.
Yep.
Yeah. Huh. That's crazy.
Yep.
And then the
Corn yield
last
here,
question.
I can remember Dad saying in the 70s it was 130 to 150. We're not quite to 300 bushel corn yet, so we haven't doubled corn yield, but we've doubled bean yield in my lifetime.
Yeah. Well, if you could double beans, if you could double corn, then you could retire before you're 60.
Yeah. Figure out how to get it to hold 2 years and we'd be set, right?
Yeah, just on your farm.
Yeah.
And then the last question, Jason, is what is one small change that can make a big impact on the future of agriculture?
One small change. Probably attention to detail. Everybody that pays a little more detail on their own farm, whether it's marketing or getting out and checking the planter or getting out and checking the combine, or attention to detail would make a
Mm-hmm.
lot of large impact for no more time than it takes to do it.
Yeah, and I think we can all think back to that one time where you're like, no, I don't need to, and you should have,
Yeah.
and you could see where you should have. But I've got
Yeah.
one where I had a bearing go out in a closing wheel, and
Yep.
it struck
Drag the
that
whole farm.
50-acre field.
Yep.
Yeah, I was like, oh, it'll be okay. And did you start? Then you'd come back and side dress and go, holy crap,
Oh
that
yeah.
was a lot of corn
Yep.
that didn't get planted.
Yep. Technology anymore, it tells you the stuff on the planter monitor of whatever, get out and look will usually help. And same thing with
Yeah.
combine. Get out and look every so often. And, I'm sure a lot
Mhm.
of us have had planter monitor stories where you thought the monitor was just lying to you or whatever. You get out and check it. No, it's right.
Oh,
I
yeah.
bought a used planter. It's
Yeah, that's
actually the
right.
bean planter I got right now, 32 row Kinsey. Took off the first farm, row number 3, not planting. I get out, I dug, there's beans there. I turned the wheels, beans dropped. I'm like, I know it's planting. I can see
Mm-hmm.
it's planting. I drove, row 3, not planting. I just checked it. So I bet 15 trips in and out of that tractor checking. Okay, the monitor is not right. It's planting. I can verify it's planting. Go. I
Yeah.
planted that first 50 acres or 45 acres or whatever, backed up to the seed tender, starting to fill boxes. 1's empty, 2's empty, 3's empty. Down the line I go. I get to 14, it's full of beans. Well, those Kinseys, I don't know if yours was like that. When you put a new monitor or a seed tube in, sometimes you got to go through and actually check that what the monitor
Uh-huh.
says is number 1 is actually number 1 row. Number 2 is obviously 3 and
Yeah.
14. Whoever had it before me had them
It
swapped.
switched.
So I planted that first 40 or 50 acres was not dropping. I just thought the monitor's not right.
Oh, my.
Luckily, it was that field at the river that's back, and nobody can even see it. You can
Nobody
see
can
it
see
from
it.
a drone or a plane. It was not by the highway, thank God. So
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
we got a lot of acres that are right on
Oh,
the
yeah.
highway where everybody sees what you do.
That's where it usually happens.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
talking about the
that
differences in farm versus other industries. That's one thing farming is very unique that everybody can see what you're doing. If you had a screw up planting, if you overflowed a truck, if you got stuck, if you didn't get something planted on time and it's whatever, all your neighbors and everybody on the road sees it. Whereas if somebody's got a factory or a machine shop or like we said earlier, a drugstore or whatever, we don't know what goes on in those walls. You don't know if they're doing good or we don't know. Farming, you get to see everybody's screw ups. It's the one industry that's unique that you're doing your thing outside. We're basically a factory making crops outside. Even your non-farming neighbors will ask you something. Hey, what happened there? It looked like you got stuck. Yes, I got stuck. I'm not proud of it.
Yes, I did get stuck.
Mud all over the road, lights out there at night where, hey, they know something's not right out there. Mm-hmm. It's the one industry that's like that. I can't think of anything else to be like.
Oh, yeah. And the other thing is people aren't afraid to call because I had a hose on a side dresser sprung a leak.
Yeah,
it
is a
very
unique industry.
Well, right across the road is one of my landlord's house, and he eats breakfast every morning looking out the window at that cornfield, and he calls it, "You killed that corn. What'd you do with that corn? What happened?" Like for 2 weeks. And you know how it just grew out of it because you just burned. It was like, goodness gracious, Dave. I told you yesterday it's okay. Oh, yes.
That's when you see a lot of the mess ups we have. Maybe you didn't get the spray boom cleaned out or whatever it is. It looks awful for a week. And your neighbors are going to call you for a week. Your friends will call you for a week. Yep. You can't sleep for a week. And then once it rains and it heals up, that's fine. It'll still yield fine.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it'll be all right. Yeah, it was in a corner anyways. That crap doesn't yield. It's all right. Well, Jason, it's been great chatting with you. Thanks for jumping on with me. I've got a whole bunch of farmers on my list, and I'm scrambling to get them ahead of planting season because if I call in April and say, hey, you want to sit down and chat? You'll be like, what are you talking about?
Not many.
I'm glad we could get together. Yeah, not many. Well, maybe with August here they can.
Maybe hear a planter monitor in the background if you get them in April.
There you go. I really appreciate you being open about your transition plans and what you did with your dad and your uncle, a little bit about your background raising hogs as a young person there in Burrows, which doesn't have post office. Does have post office, yeah, whatever. And how you transitioned to full-time farming with on-farm jobs to supplement, and how your uncle and dad helped you get started without handing it over. I think you've got a story that a lot of people should listen to. So thank you for taking time on this Sunday afternoon for chatting with me.
Yes, no problem.
Great. And for my listeners, here's just another conversation where we dove deep into somebody's ag roots to see how those ag roots formed them, made them the people they are today. We're going to continue on this path of learning about people's ag roots. And I sure appreciate everybody for following, liking, commenting, and sharing your thoughts with us. Thanks, everyone.